Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention, please. The hour is 7 o'clock, and I would like to call this public hearing to order. And to begin, if you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd first like to begin by introducing the people up here on stage. To your left and moving to the right, Paul Zadkowski, Selectman, Rich Straighton, Selectman, and then to on the other side of me, Bruce Cornwell, Chair of the Board of Finance, Robert Kozlowski, Town Comptroller, Marty Lawler, Town Attorney, and Dion Craig, who is tonight's Recording Secretary. On the other side of the stage, going from your right to left, Larry Krabus, Chairman of the Board of Education, Terry Yansky, Business Manager for the Bethel Public Schools, Joe Costa and Tina Greco from Perkins and Eastman Engineers, and Bruce Gelbo, did I get that right? Okay. From ONG Construction. And Dr. Carver is down here, ready to do a brief presentation, and I would like to begin by reading the notice of the public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Bethel will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 25th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in Bethel High School Auditorium, Whittlesey Drive, Bethel, Connecticut, 06801, for a review and public comment of the following. Proposed Rockwell and Johnson School construction projects and funding. Dated at Bethel, Connecticut, 14th day of September, 2017. Board of Selectmen Matthew Knickerbocker, Richard Straighton, and Paul Zadkowski. So at this point, I would like to turn the floor over to Dr. Carver, who's going to take you through a very short presentation on the renovation projects. Dr. Carver.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hear me okay? Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to give a brief presentation. I promise it will be brief because this is obviously about getting public input to the projects. But we just wanted to provide you with a brief overview of the scope of the projects and a little bit of the history, a little bit about school construction grants, and show you some of the design ideas that we are considering as we renovate both Rockwell and Johnson School. So I don't know if you noticed down here, but that was the original blueprint or floor plan of Rockwell School. The building was built in 1971, which is getting close to 50 years old. And I'm not going to go over, but I know on the handouts, there's a lot of issues both in Johnson and Rockwell School that are really pushing this project and propelling it forward based on the needs. Because I gave the analogy to a group of parents earlier. It's a situation where it's like a car. You know, you can keep putting money into the car, but at some point you just have to buy a new car because of the nature of the expenditures associated with it. They are well-loved schools, but they are also nearing the end of their lifespan in a lot of different ways, and we'll go into that in a minute. And they also don't necessarily promote an environment of what we call 21st century learning, or the type of learning environment that we would like to see our children and what they are going to need as they propel themselves through the 21st century, and with the shifting job markets and the changes in curriculums, so that we can ensure that they are globally competitive and that they are meeting the needs. So I frequently get the question when I'm presenting is, why are you doing this now? You know, the state is in such a crisis. Why is the project being pushed forward at a time when there's a lot of things going on at the state level? So I just want to address that up front. The first is that the town of Bethel, like all communities across the state of Connecticut, are eligible for something called a school construction grant. We were very nervous, and we actually, Mrs. Yansky and I and the team from Perkins Eastman and ONG actually propelled it forward because we were really worried that there's going to be changes at the state level with reimbursement rates for school construction projects. And we were also concerned that there were going to be changes with the guidelines of what's considered an eligible cost, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So Bethel, when we started this project, it actually started out at a 47%, and I'm highlighting the renovate as new because that's what we're pursuing right now for both Johnson and Rockwell School. And I equate it to like gutting your house. All the systems within your house are completely renovated so that they can function for a community for 50 more years. because our schools are well maintained, and we're proud of that fact. But at this point, with the roofs and all of the electrical systems at the end of their lifespan and at capacity, we're really at a point where we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars a year to just keep it whole and to keep it to the system where the environment is actually friendly for our students. So, a little bit about our enrollment. Something that the state looks at when they are doing school construction projects is they ask districts to do a 10-year enrollment study. And they want to make sure that the district isn't overbuilding schools, which is a very legitimate thing. And so when we actually did the enrollment study twice, once back in 2013 and also as late as last year, 2016. And they projected our highest enrollment would actually be and that was I think in 2025, 2026. Was going to be an elementary, this is just K-5, doesn't include our preschool or middle or high school. They were projecting that our enrollment is about 1,200 students. You can see that our actual enrollment is much more significant than the highest projected enrollment for the next 10 years. Right now, we're about 131 students in the K-5 system over our initial piece. So what that tells you, and we can accommodate these children, it's not like we have to build more schools. We can accommodate these children within the landscape, but it just puts us in a very good position so that when we apply for the school construction grant and reimbursement, we get a maximized result. So we looked at tons of options, and I'm not gonna vet through all of them or we'd be here for 2 hours, about different things that we looked at. We looked at building all new schools. We talked about doing nothing. We talked about building having K-5 schools. We talked about closing Rockwell and what would be the educational and economic impact of all of those different things. You know, just to throw out there, I had O&G run numbers recently because it was estimated in, I think it was 2010, Terry, or 2013, they had estimated that if we did nothing, it would cost the town of Bethel $18.9 million. O&G ran the figures for us recently, and now they're looking at $18 million just for Johnson and $11 million just for Rockwell. And that would be just to replace, get it up to code, replace the roofs, expand the electrical systems, all of those pieces. So doing nothing has a cost. And we looked at a lot of different options. Our final choice is that we really felt from an educational perspective in preparing that student for that 21st century learning is that we would reorganize our grade levels, and it was approved by the Board of Education last spring, I believe, to have Berry remain a pre-K 2 school, Rockwell a K2, and Johnson a 3-5. And there was a lot of reasons that we felt that was critical, which I'm not going to read to you, but they're there. So what is our conceptual design and what are we looking at? So we're looking at Rockwell School being approximately 305 students for grades K, 1, and 2. If you do that breakout in terms of the square footage and look at what percent is actually going to be dedicated to student learning and what is for administration and other pieces, you'll note that 56% of the facility is for student learning. That's things like your classrooms. People often say, well, what's community learning? What is that? That's your libraries, your art rooms, your gymnasiums, cafeteria, any type of joint spaces between all of that. So you can see in the overall design that it's actually only 5% is administrative in nature. And I'm going to show you what that design looks like in a second. Johnson's pretty similar, except the population is a little bit bigger with 644 students. So to give you a quick overview of the concepts that we're looking at, this is Johnson as it is today, all right? If we add on, and I think you have the pictures on your flyers if I'm not right, you'll note that there are a few enhancements to the buildings, and I'm just going to point out a few of them. But if you look to the right, the kind of brown, the darker brown, that's an additional addition for the added grade level. So it likely will be, it could be 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade in that additional addition. It will also be used as swing space during the school construction process. So as we are adding classrooms, as we are renovating the space, children will actually go into there, and that will negate the use of portable classrooms for Johnson. The other big feature that we think that this solves is right now we're having a tremendous amount of difficulty with safety, especially particularly with the traffic patterns. So you'll note that in the new design, you'll have a parent loop and you'll have a parent drop-off loop. I'm sorry, you'll have a bus loop and a parent drop-off loop so that you can separate the spaces. Right now, when people walk, you all have seen the Jersey barriers, right? They're lovely, right in front of Johnson School. Right now, it's a huge problem because people actually walk through the Jersey barriers when buses are coming. And it's really just not safe. So it's a huge, huge problem. It won't really affect any of the existing fields with one exception. So the softball field will remain as is with a little bit of an enhancement actually. And we'll just have to move the soccer field slightly over to accommodate the gym area. It will have a full-size gym. The reason for the full-size gym is primarily that because there's 644 students, we have to have dual classes. So you'll have 2 PE classes running at the same time with a divider through those so that can occur that way. It will also function from a community perspective also because it is a full-size gym. So if there are park and recs or athletic events or things like that, they can also be used to accommodate that facility also. So that's roughly Johnson. Now we designed the school also to separate the spaces from academic spaces to the right. So all of your classrooms, your media center, all will be on the right side of the building. I know it's hard to see. On the left side, and let me just mention right now, all of these designs are on our website. So if you want to look at them really closely, you can study them at greater length. But all of on the left-hand side are the shared spaces, the art rooms, the gymnasium, all of those pieces. And it provides a dual function. One is it separates spaces. Right now, one of the problems that we have is that when we go into Berry, let's say, I see Mrs. Legnard here, when we go into Berry, people have to walk through the entire building to get to the gym sometimes. And so this will allow a public entrance to come from the outside, and it'll also create a kind of a sound barrier so that the academic classes are separated from the specials classes. In addition, because we have an award-winning music program, we wanted to maximize the space, and our strings, chorus programs, and band starts actually in 4th grade. Strings starts in 3rd grade. So we've created an ensemble room so that, because we have probably 400 students, Mrs. Salerno, that participate in music right now. So we created a space that would also allow for the platform to go up to the auditorium so that if they wanted to have the gymnasium, we're calling it a gymatorium, right? So it has a dual function. But they have access to the stage, and the stage can also be used as a classroom. So I'll show you that in a minute. The second level is just more classroom spaces. One of the features within the design is that the media center is actually 2 floors, so it provides a lot of natural light into the facility. It has a STEM classroom. As we have, it's a district initiative also always to promote STEM activities, but it allows students to work on projects and leave them there and be able to go back so that they can experience kind of a multi-day thing without having the cleanup and taking down of spaces. And it provides for art spaces on the 2nd floor. So here's Johnson. These are just some pictures of conceptually of what the design looks like. You'll note that this is the addition. So this is the area to the right that will house probably 5th grade. It allows a lot of natural light. If you've ever been in Johnson, it's a little bit like a dungeon because there isn't a lot of natural light. I mean, one of the community forums that we had is that parents and community members feel it's just very dark when you go in there. So we have incorporated security measures with having that much glass as we look at the project. This is the current Johnson gym. You're going to note, look at those happy little children doing cartwheels. You'll note that you see that there's a platform, like I said, right in the gym. And we decided to take it out of the cafeteria for several reasons. One is you cannot fit the whole school in the cafeteria. It's just impossible. We would be breaking fire codes if we did that. The second is we don't have enough space currently where we can invite parents in. So we wanted to make sure that we are maximizing space to provide not only for the students, but also to provide parents to come in and see the productions. So Rockwell's current site presents a lot of challenges, especially the nature of where it sits on that hill, right? And also has some very similar geographic issues and site flow issues with traffic. So what we're proposing is to actually, again, we have the same issue as Johnson, parent drop-off, and the buses come in the exact same area, and children frequently get off that, and they have to walk between buses to get into the building. So what we're proposing is to actually take the bus loop to the rear of the building. And what we would do is so coming off Whittlesey, there's already a service road that's there. And they obviously have to remove some ledge, and the estimates include all of this that we're going to show you in a bit. And we'd actually use part of the ledge to fill the playground, which would be expanded a little bit to the right of the building if you're facing it, so that there's adequate play space also. That would also be the area where we would put a few portable classrooms. We initially wanted to do these projects sequential, meaning that we were going to start with Johnson and then go to Rockwell. The board, and I think the Board of Finance and the Board of, them too. John Mente's committee. Yes, thank you. When we looked at the figures, we actually save about $1 million by doing the projects concurrently. So the estimate that we're going to show you tonight is actually doing the projects concurrently as opposed to sequentially. We also really took a hard look on what's the impact to education and our students, because that to me is the most important thing. But it really was negligible. It wouldn't matter either way. So we really felt that if it was going to save the taxpayers that amount of money, that we should consider the project that way. So that's what we did. Now we are staying within the envelope of the Rockwell building, which is challenging because there's fire codes around K and 1 going to the second floor, but we're able to work out many of them. So you'll note that the actual layout or the structure of the building, the envelope, looks exactly the same as it is currently. We also tried to stay within existing frames and spaces, because the more you start to tear, like your home, the more you start to tear down walls and move things to different spaces, the more expensive it is. So we really tried to maximize the design of the new Rockwell to keep the existing structures architecturally to minimize the cost. And so you'll see some changes, but you won't see substantial changes through the building. I do want to point out that we've moved the main office to the front of the building. One of the primary reasons there is right now, if you've been into Rockwell lately, I don't want to say it's unsafe, but it's tricky because you can come into the building and somebody could go right up the stairs. So having the main office right at the entrance where parent drop-off and pickup would be is probably the best use of those spaces. Again, we tried to keep the academic areas to the right, separate from the specials areas. We tried to keep the gym and a platform in the gym, so that same concept as Rockwell, so that we can have performances and have the ability to have the whole school there and possibly have more parent events that incorporates that. There's Rockwell. Here's the new design. You'll note that it's within the existing structure of the building. So we're not putting any additions, just a small addition in the rear by the gym for the platform, but we're not adding on or changing anything, but we're trying to bring in some of the key things that we think are important, like natural light, in creating that flexible learning environment that propels us forward. So you're gonna say, how much is this gonna cost? Good question. So It's important to note that we actually had two separate estimators estimate the cost. We had both O&G, who is a construction firm, and they have built over 200 schools across the state of Connecticut. I don't know what the exact number is. And then Perkins Eastman also had separate estimators because we wanted to be sure that the estimates that we were going to show the public and certainly the community were as accurate as they could be. And they were within like 1 or 2% of reconciling, and we're able to do that. And the way they do that is they actually look at the preliminary site drawings and the concept drawings, and because of the wealth of experience that they have, are able to develop fairly accurate estimates. They included not only input from the design team, but all of our staff, all of our teachers actually were able to speak to what they felt they needed in terms of teaching and learning in their classroom. And that information, because that to me is one of the most important things, that information was incorporated into the design. They looked at assumptions, they looked at contingencies. You know, you might have questions. We do have hazardous materials in our buildings. We have asbestos, we likely have PCBs, but they built the budget estimates conservatively to incorporate a lot of those pieces. And they also developed an estimate with a guaranteed maximum price, which in the construction world means that the contractor guarantees the cost of the project so that it can't go over that amount. So, a little bit about state grant eligibility. Now, I would be lying to you if I told you that 45% of the whole project is reimbursable. It is not. It is reimbursable on eligible cost. And essentially, anything to do with construction, some soft cost, FF&E stands for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Anything that lasts more than 20 years, I think that's their lifespan, within any code compliance, any abatement of hazardous material, all of that stuff is reimbursable. What's not reimbursable is what's below. The contingencies, so you're going to see in some of the estimates that there's contingencies for like hazardous materials in abatement. Once they become, they're actually used to abate those materials, it actually becomes eligible cost. So the figures that I'm about to show you incorporate the most conservative approach to developing the state grant eligibility and how much it will cost to the taxpayers of Bethel, okay? So with that being said, I'm not going to read the figures to you. The total cost of the project, not including state reimbursement, is $65,831,000. And again, there is detailed breakdown of these estimates on our website. So if you want to get that and break it down in any way, just to see where that's made up. You can see the breakout for both Rockwell and Johnson. The total cost to the taxpayers of Bethel right now, and that does not include like space standards waivers and some other things that could lower the cost to the town of Bethel, conservatively is at $42 million. We've had, Mrs. Jansky and our team, we've had about 4 or 5 meetings at the State Department. I have no doubt, and I can speak confidently, that we'll be put on the priority list. We had a meeting as of last week. We had a phone conversation with them. So that's the total impact to the taxpayers. It could be less based on which costs become eligible over time. So the timeline. If we have a referendum in October, then we would be, and the referendum is successful, we would be looking at a December 2017 being officially placed on what's called the priority list from the state. I'm going to get a little bit into the resolution in a second and how the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen structured the resolution to protect Bethel. But if everything went perfectly, which we know that doesn't happen, right? What we would look at is the priority list in December. We would not be approved for the actual funds, and the funds would not be available till July of 2018. And then we would start some initial processes, abatement, some things, But looking at a rough, and I'm saying rough because it could be a little bit later, beginning of construction for November of 2018, and the projects would approximately last, well, 24 months for Rockwell and 26 months for Johnson. With that being said, I think that the town really took their time developing the resolutions. Do you want me to talk about that now, or wait? The resolutions and how you worded it for the state funding?
Go ahead. Well,
Marty, you'll correct me if I'm wrong.
it's up to you.
Okay, well, I think it's important. They structure the resolutions so that if the funding from the state does not come for whatever reason, then essentially the projects will not be done. The only impact or the cost would be any design fees that might be incurred as a result of that. Did I get that right, Mr. Lawler? Okay. I think that's pretty much it with the resolutions. Okay. So with that, I know I did that very quickly, but I did want to give you a broad overview of the scope of the projects and what we're trying to accomplish. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Knickerbocker, and I think he's going to start the public hearing part.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carver. Thank you. At this time, the floor is open for comments, and I would ask that residents please approach the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
We have some students who would like to speak. Can they go first? Students can speak, correct? Yeah. Go ahead, sweetie. Here, how about this?
Hi, my name is Lily. And I'm her friend Kate.
Can you tell them your address?
Oh yeah, mine is 27B Hickok Avenue. And mine is 2 Phillips Drive. Hi, my name is Lily. And I'm her friend Kate. We both went to Rockwell, and now we go to Johnson. We would like to tell you why we should renovate Johnson and Rockwell. One reason we think that the schools need renovating is the chip paint. Underneath the paint, there could possibly be unsafe materials for kids to be around. Underneath the paint, the walls can be pretty gross, too. There have been some younger kids pulling the paint off the walls and eating it. Rockwell and Johnson schools also do not have ramps, which can cause problems for people with disabilities. It would be better to have bigger elevators or ramps. The new school proposals are going to be more accessible to people with disabilities. In the old schools, it would be hard to get students in wheelchairs upstairs since the elevators are so tiny. It would be better to have ramps or bigger elevators in our schools. On the first day of school, when I was in kindergarten, some kid left an apple in their cubby. A mouse came into our classroom. Everybody was standing on their chairs screaming. We shouldn't have to worry about rodents in our school. There have also been some insect invasions. One of my sisters had their snack box invaded by ants, and the teacher had to email my parents and find her a new snack. We shouldn't have to worry about insect problems either in our schools. There could also be harmful materials inside these old buildings. If we renovate the schools, we can get rid of these things and make these learning facilities safer for children. One of the district's main worries is asbestos. This is a cancer-causing material that is very unsafe for anyone to be around. The cafeterias need to be bigger too. In Berry School, kids can just line up inside the cafeteria and wait till the monitors let them get their lunches. In Rockwell, you have to wait for your class to get called up to get their lunches. If you're last, you only have about 10 minutes to eat. Another thing is that Rockwell and Johnson, the roofs are at the end of their serviceable lifetimes and have seen better days. The roofs can leak and damage technology and other important things in the buildings. Also, if these roofs are not fixed or changed completely, then the school may become dangerous for the children to be in. Our last point is about needing more room in the music, band, and computer rooms. When things are so cramped, it can become hazardous. Since there is not much space in these rooms, it can become really warm. Kids are getting overheated and are feeling really hot. Some kids have even gotten heat rashes. Thank you for your time. We're very thankful. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cara DiBartolo, 13 Chelsea Road. As a parent educator in the Bethel Public Schools, I wholeheartedly support the renovation of Rockwell and Johnson School. I urge you to do the same to meet the needs of staff, students, and parents within the Bethel Public Schools community. I've been fortunate to work as a K-5 literacy coach in the Bethel Public Schools for the last 9 years. Compared to the other surrounding school districts and districts across the state, the Bethel Public Schools stands out due to its innovative and forward thinking that has created a top-notch education for all our students. As a proud Bethel teacher and parent, it is always an honor to hear from surrounding districts that they look to us in terms of education systems, structures, policies, and programs. The Bethel Public Schools education system is unmatched, and with the renovation of Rockwell and Johnson schools, the education system will only continue to improve and meet the needs of students in the 21st century. But more importantly, when my husband and I began the arduous process of selling our house and moving from our home in Danbury, the only town we would consider was Bethel. We wanted our 2 young boys, both students at Rockwell School, to have the best education possible. And as luck would have it, we were able to move to the Bethel community just over a year ago. Our boys have been part of an amazing and caring school community, and with the passing of this renovation project, they will continue to grow as students both socially and academically. As parents, we want what is best for our students. We want them to graduate the Bethel Public Schools having gone through a rigorous, innovative, and student-centered curriculum that is further supported by updated 21st century schools. The current conditions of both schools do not meet the needs of the 21st century learner in terms of space, infrastructure, and comfort. The renovations need to happen if we want all our students and all of our teachers to be granted the opportunities to take part in teaching and learning that meets the global competition. Rockwell and Johnson School are in so many ways the gateways to our town. It is where children begin their educational journey, forming the education and social foundations they will rely on through graduation at Bethel High School. These are 2 schools where staff and parents work together to meet the needs of all our students, as well as support the schools. Furthermore, the renovation project will only strengthen the connection between home and school. With the new configuration, students will have less transitions between schools and truly build a sense of community. Let's do what is right by the Bethel Public Schools parents, students, and staff. I strongly urge you to support the renovation project and continue to have the Bethel Public Schools be acknowledged in the state of Connecticut as innovative and a progressive district. The Bethel Public Schools is a leader in education, and as we continue to grow as a community and building our knowledge of what 21st century students need, please support the renovation project.
Hi, Bill Hillman, 86 Walnut Hill Road in Bethel here. I'm kind of known a bit as a numbers guy, and I've been in communication with Mr. Kozlowski and Terry Yansky on some of the details of the financing. At the time, I didn't have all of the figures that Dr. Carver disclosed, but what I did do was put together a model of a municipal bond, amortized a couple of different ways. The Stony Hill bond for the sewer in Phase 2 was a bond that was amortized in a way that minimized the annual impact early on to the interest and debt service. So I put together a schedule and compared the cost of doing this to the cost of not doing the renovation. Now, not doing the renovation can come in 2 flavors. One flavor, which is what was described now at $29 million in total, is you don't renovate as new, but there's still a heck of a lot of things that need to be fixed. The third option is we continue to put about $500,000 barely maintaining these schools as they are. What I would like, through you, Mr. Knickerbocker, to Mr. Kozlowski, is to get some actual figures other than my estimates in the worksheet that I gave you as to the mill rate impact of the bond in the first few years versus the mill rate impact of the repairs that can go up to as much as $25 or $30 million over the course of the next 10 or 12 years. And if I may, I'd have a follow-up question after that.
I will get from Mrs. Yansky the numbers that O&G and Perkins and Easton have worked up for the renovations or the remodel if we do nothing on the buildings at all. I know right now, we're looking at probably 1.25 increase in the mill rate just based on the current renovations that will happen to the schools. So if you look at the first few years of the projects, including the new addition of the PD, because of the way our debt has been structured, and over the last few years, it's been coming, a number of years, it's been declining. The impact in the first 2 or 3 years of the 2 projects that will come on is very minimal. But then it starts to escalate to a point of about $269 for the average home, $217,000 home, and move out over a period of a number of years. We were looking at about a 25-year amortization on this bond. So the $43 million would run about $62 million in total at the end with principal and interest. So, I mean, I can work up a comparison with the repairs if the project doesn't go forward and do a comparison,
Well,
but I think
if-
it's not
if-
going to be that far off.
If I might ask, because the spreadsheet I gave actually had that comparison based on $25 or $30 million. And at $30 million, over the course of 12 years, you're looking at something like roughly $2.5 million per year. So if you were to have to fund that, you actually get to a 1.4 mill rate impact if what you're looking at is approximately 1.8 million per mill.
So if you use today's dollars, our budget today, and go forward, just using those without any escalation at all, you're probably looking at somewhere around $300 a year. Just
So
for
the
that.
cost of the renovation, build as new, is essentially the same or less to the taxpayer impact as the cost of these patchwork fixes. Now, the other option is to continue the $500,000 a year that's currently the bare bones, let's fix what breaks kind of a thing. If I could ask, through Mr. Knickerbocker, to Dr. Carver, what happens to these buildings if we just feed the beast, throw good money after bad, and just have the minimal, let's fix what breaks and not make anything better?
The impact to the school environment? Yeah, I mean, as the young lady spoke, the roofs are at the end of their life cycle. There is, as she also mentioned, they're not accessible to students with disabilities. They would have to be brought up to code. The electrical panels are at the end of their life cycle, so they're not holding the infrastructure that we're bringing in terms of integration of technology. Terry, do anything?
Well, if you're talking about the 460 account that I think most
Yes.
of our taxpayers are familiar with, you know we've had a budget right around $500,000 a year for maintenance. A lot of that is maintenance to check the elevators and plow and things that would have to continue. The amount that's gone towards making true improvements, Bill, 150,000, 180,000 out of that, we don't really make a dent. I mean, for example, we wouldn't have been able to do what, the upgrades we did in the room that we're in today without additional help of the Board of Finance making a separate appropriation for that. The types of things we do are maybe expand a little bit on our security systems, replace partitions in the bathrooms, a few at a time, replace a little bit of furniture. It doesn't, for a whole pre-K-12 system, that 180,000 doesn't really do the trick. You're talking replacing HVAC systems, replacing roofs, upgrading electrical, windows. Those are all very costly and could never be attempted within the current budgeting that we do.
Thank you. And another question, follow-up to Mr. Kozlowski. You'd mentioned something like about a $260 add-on to our taxes. I'd like to get a better elaboration of that, in that the mill rate contribution, roughly 1.25 mils for renovation, doesn't necessarily mean that taxes go up. 1.25 mils because we have grand list growth. We also have other options such as looking at the expense structure. And are you really, basically saying we approve the renovation, the typical homeowner is going to pay $260 a year more? Or are there other ways in which the actual taxes that people pay could be mitigated?
Yeah, I mean, right now, as you mentioned, the grand list could grow, so that would mitigate the amount, 269 to come down. Expenditures could go up or go down, but the majority of our expenditures right now is labor-related, and there's union contracts that dictate over the next 3 or 4 years what the new salaries will be. So the way I calculated the numbers was strictly on the current year's budget going forward. All right, and if you wanted to escalate it 2%, 3%, I mean, you're going to have an increased cost there, but the other factor is increased growth in the town.
But we have an expense freeze right now because of the uncertainty of the state budget.
Maximum is 3% at this point.
So to summarize what I think I've heard, $29 million to do necessary repairs is likely to cost the taxpayer more per year over the next 4 to 6 years than the renovation as amortized by a schedule similar to what I proposed to you. 1.25 mil versus what I'd calculated is about 1.4 to 1.5 mils. I mean, that seems to me to be fairly simple math, and it leads you to a logical conclusion. But I think there also has to be concern for homeowners that are having trouble even paying today's taxes. So I think support for this kind of has to look at both the big picture of what happens with the state budget and how it shakes out with the grand list growth and how you manage expenses. But thank you for the information.
Bill, if I could add, when Bob and I met, we didn't want to sugarcoat this at any, we didn't want to put a lot of assumptions. So I said, this as a standalone, Bob, let's just be straight and tell people if this was the only thing that happened, what would the impact be? Just so that we were as upfront as possible.
Well, like I said at the beginning, I'm kind of a numbers guy, and numbers are numbers. They are what they are, and in this case, they kind of tilt the balance in favor of the renovation amortized over 25 years. Thank you.
Cynthia McCorkindale, 19 Elgin Avenue. So the first thing I want to say is that I really appreciate the Board of Education, Dr. Carver, and Mrs. Yansky for pretty much just contorting everything to a point where, to make it, because I know this is something that is very necessary. I know that we need to do this. And I have 2 questions and then a comment. So I just want to lay that out there. In fact, if I was just thinking that as far as a district duo, in my memory, you two are the best that we've ever had. So I do believe that. So the 2 questions I have, and probably the architect or the Board of Ed could answer this. How much is it estimated to be eligible costs? What part of the 65 million would be reimbursable, or the 45% would be reimbursable?
Yeah, on the, this is Bruce Gelbar, O&G. Bruce Gelbar, O&G. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Let's see. On Rockwell, we have net eligible about 17 million. Yeah, it's about 45 million.
45%.
46 million.
Oh, eligible cost would be 46 million of that?
Yeah.
No,
So-
no, it's not. It's 40.
35. Hold on.
I got to get my glasses on. Sorry. The total cost of the project, which I had projected, was $65,831,000.
Right.
Right? If you want me to break it out between Rockwell and Johnson, or just total?
Just the whole thing.
Okay.
I just want to know what the eligible costs are estimated to be.
Right now,
Yeah.
without the contingencies and everything, conservatively, it's $42,245,000.
So we would be reimbursed 45%, in the ideal world, 45% of that.
No, that would be what is so the difference between the two.
So 20-something?
Yeah.
All right, okay.
So the reimbursement is
$23,586.
Okay, just wanted to get that out there. And the second question I have, because I have to be honest, I don't trust the state of Connecticut in any way right now. Can they revise their matrix, their list of eligible costs midway through the project?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Typically, after you submitted, the rules are what they are. They will not change those rules.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
So now, I just want to say, because, part of campaigning, I'm knocking on doors. I've knocked on a lot of doors in the past few months. I'm talking to people who are really, really struggling. So I understand what Mr. Hillman said about what it could be, up maybe between $250 and $280 a year. But I've talked to people where that is really critical to them. I mean, even $20 a month. I've talked to people who can't afford to live here anymore, whose grown children have moved, that they have to actually go live with those children somewhere other than Bethel. I'm just saying this because I think that I would like to think of some way that we can not put this completely on the backs of the taxpayers. Now, something that struck me when the woman before Bill was speaking is she said, let's do what's right for the students, the parents, and the staff. I've been talking to 30% of the town that doesn't comprise that have maybe no children or they don't work for the school. So I'm just right now speaking on their behalf because I've spoken to many. So with that, I have another question. You created a contingency plan in case everything went wrong, right? Mm-hmm. My question is, are there any of the more innocuous accommodations that could be implemented to mitigate the cost to the taxpayer? That's not for, it's for.
Yeah, I think they are embedded. I think there's a couple of factors. So within the contingencies, because there was concerns about hazardous materials, asbestos, PCB remediation, they did put in a healthy contingency in those areas.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm sorry.
The other,
I'm asking about your contingency budget that you made. That's what I'm talking about. When we went through budget season, you made two budgets. One was like if the sky fell. So it's not for your guests. It's you created a budget that if everything fell through of everything from the state, that would be the worst case scenario budget. What I'm asking is, are there any elements of that budget, the more innocuous elements, that could be implemented in order to accommodate or to mitigate the taxpayer burden on this project? And that would be for Mrs. Yansky.
So I believe that Cynthia is referring to our operating budget on an annual basis, okay? So I'm going to say that keeping costs in line and balancing that with meeting the needs of having great graduates come out of Bethel Public Schools is what we do on a continuous basis. And we were able to report to the Board of Finance at the last meeting, because we started this year, I think our increase, Bob, our increase was around $700,000 to our budget, but knowing that there were difficulties at the state and trying to prepare for that, We did take advantage of a change in health insurance. So all of our people, as you know, moved to the Connecticut Partnership Plan 2.0, and we had the option as a district whether to implement changes that were made at the state level by CBAC here, October 1, or wait till next year. Well, that's a $400,000 savings to Bethel Public Schools, and knowing that we may get a letter telling us how much our reduction is, we've been trying to prepare for that. The other thing that under Dr. Carver's direction we have done is anytime there was an opening, either a retirement or someone that moved or for whatever reason, it was strictly evaluated as to whether or not for now or for long term we could do without. And so right now we've left positions open because we can't go forward and spend the money as if it was all there to then find out that we don't have it and wouldn't be able to finish the year. So Cynthia, we are always reevaluating everything we do. Every year we talk about the staffing in every school. We always talk about when new things, 21st century learning skills, but you have to be able to give up things that you know are not working. And we have those discussions on an ongoing basis. And I think we do that every day.
I appreciate that. I absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah.
But this is not normal circumstances. That's all my only point is, I'm not saying, for you to take a hatchet and start hacking up your budget. That's not where I'm at. I'm just saying, is there anything in that budget? And you don't have to answer that right now. It's just my concept of talking to the people. Because here's the thing, and I know because I've walked in both worlds. If you have a little bit of play in your financial situation, who cares? $300 a year. I wouldn't care if but there are people who literally have no flexibility. And it just is, this is just another encumberment. I'm just speaking on behalf of those people because I've been talking to those people. And I put that question out just as a possibility.
I would say on behalf of Dr. Carver and I, you have our commitment to do that on an ongoing basis. And I also think that having such an open and good relationship with the town finance, and especially Mr. Kozlowski, I think we've worked together to try to do better for Bethel, and that's what we're here to do.
Okay, thank you.
Good, it's good height. Okay. Kim Romero, 114 Chestnut Ridge Road. I'm here to support the renovation, and I just want to say to Cynthia's comment, I am one of those people who will not have children in Rockwell or Johnson when this goes through. My daughter's in 3rd grade right now at Rockwell, and my son is in 5th grade. And I need to speak to the conditions that they have. First of all, our teachers, as we've all said, are phenomenal. We have had such an amazing experience in both Rockwell and in Johnson. But there are areas that are serious concern to me as a person that's been in these buildings. First, access to those with disabilities is a huge problem. If you have a child who has a wheelchair, it's going to be really hard for them to get up to the top of either of those buildings. And I'm very concerned about that with children. As far as the spaces in the building, there is, in the state of Connecticut, we follow SRBI, Science Research Based Intervention, or also RTI, which is the national one. We've hired a lot of interventionists to help us with students to meet those goals. There is no space in the schools right now for that to happen. These people have no room to do this instruction, and this instruction is key if we're going to meet our goals that we're asking about, with the NWEA MAP testing that we do, with the SBAC testing, or ESPA, or whatever it's called now. In order to do that, we need these interventionists that we've put forward into our budget, and there is no space for them. In addition to having no space for these interventionists, there is no space for occupational therapists, there's no space for physical therapists, and these are things that are a huge concern for special education. And realize that special education is an easy area for people to litigate through IDEA and national laws, state laws, town laws, they're all litigated laws. So if we do not accommodate those spaces, you can bet that there will be parents that are going to litigate this. The building codes are a problem, the electrical systems are a problem. Again, if we want to go to that 21st century skills that everybody is speaking about, we need that technology. Every single child is getting a Chromebook. You know, there's the one-to-one that we're having in schools today. If you want that one-to-one to work, you need those electrical systems to work. We cannot expect these children to do everything on Google Classroom, as is expected for every student, and we're trying to go paper-free and get them into the 21st century if your electrical systems are not working. This is essential. The heating and cooling systems are a huge problem. As the students here, by the way, I'm so impressed with how those two students spoke. That is absolutely amazing to me. And I am so proud of what our school system does for them, because that was beautiful. I know that there are people in town that will say, we didn't have these when we were in school. We didn't survive with air conditioning. You're right, we didn't go to school with air conditioning. But you've got Berry Elementary School that has it. You've got the middle school and you've got the high school. So how is that an equity issue? When a parent comes into town and says, I want my kid to be at Berry because they have air conditioning. Is that an equity issue? It is. It's a problem. It's a health problem as well. Okay, so for these children who are getting sick, and they are getting sick in these small spaces, and they are getting heat problems, and as they spoke, they are getting those issues. I have huge safety concerns with both Rockwell and with Johnson. With Rockwell, my concern number one is those stairs. Those stairs are ridiculous and need to be fixed, but in addition to that, the pickup area is not okay. For those buses to fit in that small space is not okay. It is not safe. When those students walk up to the top of those stairs, they have to wait. They have to wait for those buses to go by, and I'm telling you, a kindergarten child is going to run across. Whether you want them to or not, they're going to run across. So it is extremely important that we make that safer. Those Jersey barriers that you speak about at Johnson are ridiculous. I'm sorry, but as I drive in, I have to pick up my child twice a week. When I pick them up at Johnson School, I park on that left-hand side, and I have to cross over with my third grade child, who, by the way, is this tall, across that area. It is not safe for them to do that. Whether they have the buses there or not, it is not safe. So that needs to be fixed. Most importantly, I think there's a huge issue with hazardous materials within the schools. Last year, Johnson's gym was closed, and they were closed because the tiles were falling down. Now, of course, as parents, I'm very concerned by that. Thank goodness it was during a time of year where that gym classes could go outside. But I'm telling you right now, I do not want my children, I do not want future children exposed to asbestos that's in schools from 1970. That's not okay. We built schools very differently back then. These are dangerous materials, and I'm going to tell you right now that there is going to, at some point, be litigation against that. If we do not fix this, somebody's going to come forward and they're going to sue Bethel Public Schools. A bigger issue with that is the mold. Okay, you walk in those schools, I can feel the mold as I walk into both Johnson and Rockwell. I can feel it. And this is not okay that this mold is there. You can look on the windows, you can look on the walls, you can see it there. No amount of paint, no amount of washing it from the custodians, as great as they are, is going to fix that. It needs to be fixed. So those are my concerns. My question for the group here is, when was the last OSHA report on Rockwell and Johnson? I am an elementary school teacher. I do have an administrative background, so I am aware of what OSHA is. And what I'm wondering is, when is the last OSHA report and what did they find?
Yeah, I don't know that we have any right now, Kim. So certainly since I've been there, I would have been notified if we had, but up till now, I don't think we have one currently.
And on our website under facilities, all the reports that we do have, like the AHERA for asbestos and the EDO 50 that has to go to the state, all of those reports are always on our website under facilities. They have to be public information.
And the other question I have is there any pending litigation right now because of the exposure to these substances? And if so, has there been anything filed, like a report with the district on it?
We don't have any pending litigation.
My concern is that if we do not go forward with this, there will be litigation. And I'm very concerned about that in the schools. And I know Cynthia said that there's this population that do not have kids in the schools. My daughter will be in the renovation process. She will not benefit from the ending process at all. So I'm speaking as a taxpayer in this town, not just as a parent. My children will not be in Rockwell or Johnson when it is finished. So thank you.
Good evening, Phil Gallagher, 15 Sunset Hill Road. Some of us in this room won't be around when the bond issue, if this passes, is paid off. We've gone to the happy hunting ground, but it's incumbent, I think, for those who will be around to pay it off, that we ask the right questions at the beginning of the process. I think it's things that we need to be asked, considering the state of the economy in this state and whatnot. So I have a few questions to ask. No statements for or against, but a few questions. First of all, the state aid, the ECS money, which is what, 8-9 million?
No, 8, 9.
I mean, including all the state aid to Bethel. I know most of it is school aid, but there's also some for transportation. If we lose it all, maybe Barry can, not Barry, I'm sorry, I'm going back in time. That's a compliment, Bob, that's a compliment. Maybe Bob can answer this question. If we lose all that money, how many mills will that add to our budget?
Well, if we're going to lose about 8 million.
Pardon?
If we lose about 8 million,
Yeah.
all right, at 1.8 per mill, I mean, you're looking at roughly 4 mills.
4 mills.
4 and a quarter.
And how much would that be to the average taxpayer in Bethel?
You're probably looking at around $900, $850 to $900. just
For that, for that 8 million?
Yeah.
Make up.
Per year.
And we don't know, at this stage, here it is, almost October, we don't know whether we're gonna get $1 or $8 million. And I see I read the handout that the Board of Finance or Selectmen can rescind their resolution or put it in abatement before the referendum. However, if you're gonna have a referendum in the middle of October, that doesn't leave you much time. And you might not find out even then.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what you're thinking about. All right, that's one question. We're talking about the money, losing the ECS money. Another factor that may or may not come up, if not this year, but it's been posed, is the shifting of the cost of the teachers' pensions. I'm sure it's just not the teachers, but all the employees in the school system, their pensions to the local town. For instance, what is the payroll through Mr. Neckobar? What is the payroll that would be affected by that factor?
Certified payroll is approximately 21 million.
How much?
21 million.
21 million for the school system. Pardon?
For certified payroll, certified
21
certified staff.
So how much a percent has it been proposed that we would have to pay on that?
You know, Phil, they haven't talked about a percent. They've talked about just a flat amount.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a percent. I can't put it in terms of a percent, but it was a significant dollar amount.
Significant dollar. So there's a chance that, that seems to be been put on the back burner for now, but we don't know. But but both of these possibilities, if they don't materialize in full this year, could be materialized over the length of the bond issue, if not this year, in years to come, because the projected deficits in the state aren't getting any better, aren't getting better at all. Now, a couple years ago, when I was on the Board of Finance, maybe 6 or 8 years, we had a presentation. This was when this project was in its infancy. And I remember whoever the facilitator was an outside person that did the study, said that these two schools, Rockwell and Johnson School, are younger than 3/4 of the schools in the United States. Does that ring a bell with anybody? 3/4 of the schools in the United States are older than Rockwell and Johnson School. That's what was said a few years ago by a study group. Well, if it's so, they're worth investing money in if they're that, because they're not old schools, they're not ancient schools, and they are worth investing money. Now, in your backup plan, now you're talking about the 460 account. Obviously, the 460 account is not going to take care of some of the deficiencies that you highlight in these schools, but there's an alternative to tying up. How much of this we're going to borrow? 68 million? I mean, the total bond issue would be how much? 65 million.
No, the total project is 65. The current estimate of the cost to Bethel, which we did on a conservative basis and could come down, is around 42 million.
But you'd have to bond for 60.
No,
You would not.
no. They pay currently, the state pays currently as you submit, as
Okay.
you go along the project, so you only have to bond for the Bethel portion.
So, but still, that's a significant, that would be the biggest bond issue in the history of Bethel.
Correct, correct.
42 million,
Well,
by
in the
far.
history of Bethel.
And if once you tie up that amount of money, and your economic status situation changes, it's a well, we don't know. Was it well, might not this year, maybe in subsequent years, you're stuck with that $42 billion bond issue. And there is an alternative, which we had used with the highway program. We'd, instead of it's a much smaller scale, instead of bonding for 10 or 11 million total bond for the repairing the highways, the roads, we did short-term bonding, which that's why I was thinking of Barry Carina. He had suggested that before he passed away. Now, there's also that alternative to address the list of deficiencies that you have here, and I'm sure you're probably thinking about that as a backup plan, to short-term bonding to outside of the 460 account to take into account, get the roofs. If roofs if they're worn out and need to be repaired, that's a significant item that could be dealt with short-term bonding, as with some of the other deficiencies that you've talked about, the handicap access. Anyway, those are questions that need to be asked, and I'm still not unsure if what has to happen in order to put the referendum on the back burner if we don't have a budget in the first few weeks of October. Thank you for your time.
Alice Hutchinson, 25 Grand Street. I know what it takes to get a project like this up to the point where you present it to us. And I know that you have gone through exhaustive committees and preparation and plans, and I want to thank you for all the work that you've brought to us to this point. I know that you've prepared cost estimates and tried to squeeze every penny that you can in order to give us our best value as taxpayers. But buildings get old and things need to be repaired. And I don't have children in the school system. My two children that went to Rockwell are 33 and 35. And so I don't have a personal investment in my children being in your building. But I do, as a citizen in Bethel, have an investment from the standpoint of wanting to see children learn in an updated and safe environment, teachers be able to teach, families to have the assurance that their children are being educated well, but as a taxpayer also the investment purely from an economic standpoint in keeping these buildings updated and keeping them improved. Buildings get old, buildings need to be repaired. As a taxpayer, it increases the value of our community to allow children to learn in an environment that is clean and is healthy and is updated and doesn't have tile falling off the roof. I mean, really, we've been doing this for years. I also realize that this is a choice, that everyone's going to go to the polls and everyone's going to have a choice. And so for you to be able to present to us something in a positive light, the window is closing on us to be able to do this because of the financing from the state. It is separate from the state crisis that we're all just suffering through. This money is not the same money. That's my understanding, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So our opportunity to grab it while it's there, because it is available to us, to get the reimbursement, to do what's going to have to be done to these buildings to bring them up to modern standards without any luxuries, because Bethel's never been about luxuries. It's been about good common sense education in a positive environment, in a great school. I mean, I'm very proud to live here. I'm very proud to have a business here. So I just wanted to lend my support and express my thanks to all of you for all of your hard work. Thank you very much.
Good evening. David Horvath, 16 Karen Drive. David Horvath, 16 Karen Drive. Just a couple quick questions. Has there been any kind of a mock value engineering exercise been performed in case things go sideways? I see that they have the nice louvers on the outside of the building. Those are all nice to haves. Have you done any kind of an engineering value where if costs start overrunning, prices skyrocket, what you're going to cut and why?
Let me see if I understand your question. You're asking us to do some value engineering before the project gets started? Is that?
Yes, has there been any thought
Yeah.
process to, you want to keep the IT stuff, you want to keep all the AV, all the real core things we need, as opposed to granite stairs or the louvers on the outside of the building, the fancy things? What those costs could be remediated back so we could keep the essentials?
We haven't yet. Typically, those kinds of activities are started as the project goes through the design phases. We're just at conceptual, so we really haven't even gone that far yet.
Okay.
But those kinds of things will be studied as we go through the project. Our marching orders from the district were to keep costs in check as much as possible and to have the greatest impact with the least cost for all these designs. So as you can see, they're very modest. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. There's certainly nothing that's round. There's nothing that is fancy. It is what I would call a very basic design and a very constructible design.
Okay. Thank you. Also, last question is, I know ONG's been around for a long time. With the state of things going on in the state of Connecticut, what if ONG was to fall on hard times? Is there any kind of reassurance or insurance that if the company falls on hard times, Bethel will not be the one that pays the price?
Well,
I guess
I couldn't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. My question was, ONG's been around for a very long time. They're a solid company. What if something were to happen, that they were to fall on hard times, and they were unable to complete the project? Is there any kind of an insurance or assurance that the taxpayers of Bethel will not foot the bill for that?
Well, just want to say ONG is a very solvent company, very diversified. We've been around a long time, 1923. So as for the project and the town of Bethel, it will be a bonded project, and it's a guaranteed maximum price since it's bid.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Courtney Martin. I live at 38 Star Lane. So I want to give everybody some good news. I sell real estate in town and in the area, and Bethel is on fire. All right, guys, our property values are skyrocketing compared to the other places in the area. Our inventory is really low compared to other towns like Newtown and Reading, where people are moving out, but they're not moving back in. The reason they're moving here, the reason they want to come here, the reason why we can't keep a house on the market if it's priced correctly, because we have phenomenal schools. We have phenomenal parks. We have our town, we're one of the only ones that have a walkable downtown, a train that takes us into the city. It might be a really long train, but it gets us there, okay? Bethel is a gem. I am proud to live here. Here's the downside. If we don't do this for the schools, we've talked about it, it's going to cost more and more money every year we wait. Agreed, our state is in a dire circumstances right now. If we don't get the grant money from the state this year, we probably won't get it next year. Guys, if you want your property values to continue to grow, I know that in 2007, when the market crashed, we lost, everybody who owned a home lost a ton. The only way we're ever going to get that back is to invest in our town and invest in our future. I support the schools. I hope you will too.
Jen Larson, 128 Grassy Plain Street. I've lived in town for almost 25 years now. I've seen a few renovations done to the schools. My kids have lived through them. My two have graduated from Bethel schools. One graduated from college, is doing well. The other one is doing fantastic in college. And I have a junior in high school this year. So none of my children will benefit from this, but I will benefit from this as a taxpayer in Bethel, in that my town keeps growing and improving and making things better. Bethel is a wonderful place to live, and we want to keep it being that way. We have a lot of young families here. Kids keep coming. The numbers keep going up. They don't keep going down. We're not losing kids like other towns. So we need to give these kids the right start in life. That's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to support every child. They are our future. This is what we need to do as a town. Thank you.
Billy Michael, 27.5 Fleetwood Avenue. The school is great. This auditorium is great. The microphones are terrific. I had no idea I didn't want to be a custodian tomorrow morning, because when the superintendent walks in and says, there was kids talking about ants, and there was kids talking about mice, and we got kids, who's eating the chip paint? You're going to call those kids out, and I want to say, raise your hand, who's eating the chip paint? We never hear things like this during the budget process. The kids are all out there saying, we need more of this, more of that. Nobody's telling us. Now we're getting the truth from the little children. It's amazing. But you know what's funny? I've been around a long time. I'm one of the people that Phil Gallagher says, I'll be dead when this bond is paid for. I'll be all finished. And but when we started this education campus, one of the reasons for getting out of Grassy Plains School was there were bats in the school. So here we are, all these years later, we don't have bats, and we have mice and ants and chip paint. So maybe it's just the human condition. Maybe you're never going to escape this stuff. You know, it's funny. This last budget, Mr. Kozlowski, you gave some very good numbers as far as the price per house, what this would cost going forward. And we have revaluation. You're basing that on the value of a mill to the average homeowner. Correct. Now, do we know what the value of the mill?
Going forward? No.
Could it go up? Could a mill cost?
That grand list is not filed until
I know
January
it,
31st.
but if you, who do we ask? We have a lot of people here that look into the future. You know, everything is projections. What is the projection? Is a mill after reval going to cost the average homeowner more money or less?
Couldn't tell you. I don't know.
See, with all the projectors here, no one can project the one thing I need.
I can't even tell you when we're going to bond this either. It's not going to happen right away. There's going to be short-term notes for a period of time, 2 or 3, 4 years.
That's I thought that was some big numbers that you had. And when you said the average, the $279,000 house, that's what you're, 269, and the average tax on that is probably what? Is it 6,800, 7,000? What is the average tax?
It'll probably be around 7,500, 7,800.
So you're talking about the base right now, it's 78. And I would commend the superintendent and the business manager of the school for bringing in a 1.6% education budget this year. That was great. But even with that, and you comprise the largest aspect of the budget, we still had a 2.3% mill increase with a Board of Ed that came in with a little teensy increase. Now, this shows you how much spending is going on. And when Phil Gallagher asked about the union contracts, that's only going up. We have probably, what do we have, 400 in the school, and you got about 155 town side employees. A lot of this is union driven. A lot of this is salaries and benefits that are going up. And as far as, there was a speaker that came up and was extolling Bethel, and I agree, I love this town, but how people keep coming here, and people, the kids keep coming, but if you have some institutional memory, and a lot of us that are going to be dead when this is paid have that, there were 20% more kids in the schools during the bicentennial. When that ox train came through Greenwood Avenue, and everybody was at that bar, it wasn't Gary's then, whatever it was, the Paddock Lounge. We were at the Paddock Lounge watching the 1976 wagon train come through. There was 3,636 children in the Bethel school system. And now We have what, 3,000? We have, yes, this is true. We have 20% less kids. When the Bethel Action Committee started, which is 32 years ago, there was the town had 1,600 people. We would send out, 6,000 pieces of mail, and we had more, we had more, we have more houses now and less kids in the school system. We had more, so the percentage of the population that the students make up, let's say the 5 to 18-year-old, is down to like 16% of the town. Years ago, it was 20%. We are an aging population. And the 2007 Plan of Development suggested something. It said, look at the amount of people by the year 2020 that are going to be over 50. And it went on and on. It said, maybe you should stop looking at schools and fields, that turf field, which I know is going to be back soon, and start thinking of things for older people. Tax relief was one of them. And, and you've got plans now that's going to end up driving that Augustana Homes right out of there. We're growing with TOD in one of the biggest places where old people with elderly relief, affordable housing is going to be gone, the pressure. So I think it's misplacing money. I think it's too much money at this time when the state, I don't know where the state's going to get the money that this is supposedly locked away. There's separate money. Where is it? Where's the separate money that the state has for us? Is it in an account? Is it a box somewhere?
The state really has a separate fund for school construction grants. I believe they have capped it this year within the proposed budgets. I'm sorry, I keep getting feedback. So they have reduced the overall amount to, was it 450 million? 450 million. Costas Diamante, who's the director of the Office of School Construction, has been down to Bethel. He has toured our schools. We've had 4 or 5 meetings with him, and I think that he strongly supports the projects going forward because he sees the need.
But does he see the money? I mean, is it going to take a state tax increase to? We're going to need a state tax increase to get our ECS money. We know that. We got $3.5 billion in debt, deficit. So we know we're going to need state income taxes for that. Will we need new state taxes to bring this money down for the matching money from the state?
Well, Billy, I do not formulate the state budget, so I'm not sure what they're currently working on. I do know that in the latest Republican plan, which is now at the governor's desk, which he's likely to veto, he's been very upfront with that, Bill Duff saying no, is that it kept our ECS whole. So it kept us where we were. And again, as far as the delegation has informed me, and I talk to them very regularly, the school construction money has been there. The question with the state budget is, and it is separate in terms of the ECS versus the school construction grant. We are waiting to hear what's happening. I know that the leadership is meeting, and there's probably going to be some kind of compromise. But I can't answer the question. I mean, taxes are taxes. I think we would agree about that. Whether it's state taxes or local taxes, you're still funding the investment within your community.
The state reimbursement as it comes to us in the future. I just want to know if there's a big box of money sitting there and it's going to come to us, or it's coming to us contingent upon either increases in motor vehicle fees or state income taxes on the wealthy, or where does it, are we going to be paying for it just through a different pocket? I don't think can you answer it? Because that,
I don't think I can.
Do you know that?
I don't think we have the answer to that. I will say that something that stuck in my mind is Phil Gallagher would always say, we send a lot of money from Bethel up to the state, and what do they give us back? So I'm all for getting back the most money Bethel can get back. So,
Well, this is the biggest bond issue. I guess it was, you said 42 million is what it comes out to. With the interest over the 20 years when I'm long dead, it's 62 million. And this is the worst economic situation I've ever seen the state in. And we're spending the largest amount of money. We're asking the most amount of reimbursement from the state at a time when it's been called fiscal cancer, it's been called the Titanic in a Hurricane 5, a Category 5 hurricane. So how you can go forward with this? Of course, I'm going to be voting no on this. I'm the skunk at the picnic, but I just don't see how rational people can be spending these amounts of money in this economic climate. We have to change. We can't. You know what? We can't change. This is like lemmings going over an edge. Thank you for your time.
I'm Bill Kingston, 11 Ditmar Road in Bethel. And I often agree with Mr. Michaels, but at this point, even though it's a lot of money, I think the time has come for us to spend this money. When I was on the Board of Ed, say 10 years ago, we used to go from school to school and look around, and I can say that Rockwell at that point needed renovations very, very badly, and to be brought up to speed to enable modern education to take place and develop as it should. I'm very proud of the schools we have in Bethel, and I think there's a couple of factors. I think one, from a person who doesn't have kids in the school system, I just, in general, think that an educated populace is very important, no matter whether you have kids in the school system or not. And I think the situation in Rockwell and Johnson are beginning to impact the ability of teachers to provide the quality education that we need going forward. Secondly, I think it's been alluded to before, but our educational system is one of the gems of this town. And even if you don't have kids in school, it impacts housing prices. And if you do want to ultimately leave Bethel or have an inheritance of your home to your children, these things are important. And we're an excellent town. People are coming to this town for the educational system and the ambiance of the town. And I think it's time, despite the fact that the state is in tough times, I think it's time to go forward with these renovations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Are there any more comments? Any other comments, questions? Going once? Going twice? Hearing none, I will thank you all for attending tonight. This has been very helpful for all of us up here on stage. Wish you all a good evening, and I will now formally close this public hearing. Have a wonderful evening.
I didn't recognize a little white shirt. Draped in somebody else's job. No. His son is birthday. Right. Kim is still hunting somewhere. The last